Good evening. In a speech he was due to deliver the day after he died, Franklin Roosevelt called the United Nations the greatest contribution that any generation of human beings can make in this world. Soon after, his wife Eleanor called the moral foundation of the UN, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Magna Carta for men everywhere. On the Belfast streets where I grew up, peace, justice, and human rights often seemed like distant dreams. But I took those powerful words to heart. And when I got a job at the UN, I thought I had my dream job. I would be able to ensure those principles were other children's reality. But what happens when this greatest contribution to the world fails to live up to its own standards? What happens when even UN staff violate the International Magna Carta? And when the UN's chief investigator admits he fakes inquiries, and I quote, to get the Americans off the UN's back. Who guards the guardians then? UN Watch does. They refuse to play the go-along to get along game that diplomats, bureaucrats, and other NGOs play at the UN. Hillel himself put it perfectly. Ambassadors prefer to avoid confrontations so they can get in their Mercedes and enjoy a quiet weekend in comfort, he said. It's the path of least resistance to keep good relations. I'll say the quiet part out loud. It's not just the ambassadors. When I reported that my boss was handing names of human rights activists to Beijing, I was still idealistic enough to believe that UN managers would care. They didn't. They offered me a promotion and money for my silence. I was still idealistic enough to believe NGOs like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch would care. I was wrong. They simply ignored a human rights abuse happening right in front of them to preserve their access to UN bureaucrats. But UN Watch did care, just like they do when the UN covers up child sex abuse, hires corrupt or anti-Semitic officials, or hands the human rights reins to Iran, Russia, and China. Day after day, for 30 years, UN Watch has tirelessly called out abusive and autocratic regimes and their UN cheerleaders. How much do we owe them? My former colleagues at the United Nations Human Rights Council branch have conveniently provided the answer in their campaign to silence UN Watch. No other NGO suffers that treatment. Yet even in the face of censorship, UN Watch's speeches are the most impactful and most viewed. And UN Watch doesn't just speak about victims. It gives them a voice themselves, bringing them to Geneva to confront autocratic regimes in the only room in the world where that is possible. And UN Watch cares about keeping them safe by stopping the UN handing their names to those regimes in advance. If they were still here today, how would Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt view what has become of this greatest contribution, of this international Magna Carta? As for me, at heart, I'm still that little girl in Belfast who dreamed of making the world a better place. That's what I believe I'm doing by pointing out UN corruption and misconduct. And that's what I know UN Watch is doing. The world is, quite frankly, a better place because UN Watch takes the United Nations much more seriously than the UN takes itself. Thank you.